Welcome back, everybody. Over the last few days, I watched the new Letterkenny season. My wife and I did. We were about 4 episodes in when I asked a question: "What's wrong with this season?" Now, by the time the season's over, I think I have it figured out. I think I have it figured out, and it's something we may see with other shows this year, and we're gonna have to just kind of push this aside. The last time I can remember having seasons where you had to kind of go, well, that happened, was during the writer's strike. So Hollywood had the writer's strike, and TV shows, they sucked that year because the good writers were on strike. And so a lot of shows suffered. It was like, what is going on? This is awful. And then you'd remember, right, the writers are out. And then the strike got cleared up, and next thing you know, the shows were good again. Now, what's going on with the pandemic means that for Letterkenny and shooting the show, they're going to have certain controls on how many people can be on the set, certain controls on testing, certain controls on a lot of things that are foreign to them. And one thing that I think may have affected the show this year, they wouldn't have had access to ice surfaces. Like the indoor ice rinks, they wouldn't have had access to those like they did in previous seasons. So one criticism I saw in a review was that all the storylines kind of don't happen until the last episode. Right. So the first episode kind of cleans up what happened at the end of last season. Then the last episode kind of sets up next season. And in between, it's a series of skits. Now, my theory is, and I don't know necessarily this is what happened, is that they basically were saying, okay, we've got our scripts written, we're going to bring in these actors and actresses for these days, for these parts, and we're going to film. I get the feeling they may have filmed a bunch of episodes at the same time. And when you look at the cast, there's a limited amount of extras. There's a limited amount of people around in the show. Now, the nice thing is, it's okay for Letterkenny because it's not a show that's about like a big city. It's not a show set where you'd normally see hundreds and hundreds of people. But it is still affected by the pandemic, and it still makes it so that there's certain storylines that they aren't going to be able to work out. And I get the feeling that again, if you look at this show, a lot of it was skits. A lot of it was okay. We've got this clever wordplay going on, and then you realize halfway through the episode, oh, this episode's about clever wordplay. So I don't really have to worry about giving spoilers, right? So at the end of last season, Dirks is getting beat up by the guys from Letterkenny, and that's the fallout of this episode. And then at the end of, or at the first episode, and then at the end of the last episode, you find out that Dirks is now with Derry's ex girlfriend, the French girl. I'm trying to remember her name now, but these guys have had different girlfriends, but there are storylines that didn't go anywhere. And again, I am giving them a pass. So while other people are going to get mad because their storylines don't go anywhere, I'm giving them a pass because I'm amazed they were able to put together a season given all the lockdowns and everything else that's been going on with Ontario. I'm amazed and impressed they were able to get it done. So kudos to Jared Kiso and the crew and being able to get a season done under these conditions. But what was that with Katie? So Katie decides she's going to go scorched earth, which is date as many people as possible. And then 2 episodes later, she stops. She just stops. It just goes nowhere. And it was interesting because Angie gets mentioned in one episode, and then Angie comes back in that one episode, and I thought, wait, are they going to put Angie and Katie together? It's possible. Katie's made it clear in previous seasons that she's interested in men, she's interested in women. She doesn't really care one way or the other. I think she prefers men, but she's willing to date women, sure. And so I thought, that might be interesting. If Angie was dating Katie, Wayne wouldn't like that. Wayne would have some issues with that, rightfully so. You could have some interesting. Angie doesn't come back. Okay, where's Tanis? Last episode, there's Tanis. Where's the storyline to do with the whole energy drink thing? Shows up in the last episode with Tanis. I love Tanis. I think she's fantastic. I think of all of the actresses on the show, she might be the best actress on the show. but I will say this, that Camilla Kowal, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but the one that plays Bonnie McMurray, I'm glad to see Bonnie McMurray's finally kind of become a character, that she's not just the eye candy, which is weird, because she's not, like, when you see her outside the show, that's really not her. Like, it's one of those things that is interesting, is that when you follow the cast outside of the show, they're not really like their characters. Like, I get the feeling that Jared Kiso understands Wayne, but they're not. So when you see them outside the show, I know when we saw Letterkenny perform live in Vancouver last year, and they had Tyler Johnson, who's Stewart, go up there, and they had Michelle Milette, who's Katie. She was up on stage at the end, and I remember saying to my wife, "She is so bloody tiny. Like, she is." And again, when you see her on TV, you're like, "She's a good-looking woman." And you see her in person, you're like, "She's so tiny, and she looks like she's like 14." This is so. So again, it's completely different. I wouldn't. I would actually go for. I'd actually say that if I saw her in a store somewhere, I saw her in public, I'd go, "That kind of looks like Michelle Millen, but can't be, right?" So that kind of thing. I thought she did a good job this year. They did have some good episodes. Kind of. I do like Wayne more with his girl now, but then at the end of this season, they kind of have, here comes the French girl back, Marie Fred or whatever. And again, keeping track of all of the different various women that have come in and out of the show over the years is can be daunting, because there's been more than a few. Which, anyways, it's interesting, because they show her come back at the end. He doesn't say anything to her, but all I can think is, please, for the love of God, no. Do not put Wayne back together with her. This has been a thing with this show, where Wayne kind of switches girlfriends every year, and it's kind of smooth, and it doesn't become like this odd, off-putting thing. Going back to Tanis, for instance, he dated Tanis for a while, it didn't work out, and it doesn't get mentioned anymore, which is fine. I thought Jonesy and Riley had some good scenes, because again, it didn't feel like they were episodes as much as they were scenes. The coach, I have to say, I think Mark Forward, I don't know how much of what he said was scripted and how much of what he said was improv. I get the feeling there's a lot of improv in there. If it's not, that means he's delivering it very well. If there is, kudos to him. The stories he tells about Barb, and I understand there's people who might be like, "Oh, I'm tired of it, it's the same thing." But it still had its entertaining moments. It still had its funny parts. And I think what made me laugh at it was Riley and Jonesy's reaction of, "No, coach, please don't. No, just please stop. Please don't. Don't tell us." Oh, he's going to go into another story. And you could just see like their soul draining out of them as they were listening to more stories about his sexual exploits with his now deceased wife. It's some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen on the show. And to me, it was Riley and Jonesy's reaction that was as funny as anything said by the character of the coach, who now isn't the coach, and they're in beer league. So Riley and Jonesy, at some point in time, the characters have to have like some kind of an existential crisis about never having reached their goals. That has to happen at some point where they have that crisis. So I guess we'll see where those storylines go for next year. The idea of Gale and Dickens together, I thought was, I mean, again, it was entertaining, but it was a skit. There was a lot of things in this season that were skits more than they were episodes, because there was no arc. And by the time we reached, I think it was the 5th episode, I said to my wife, I said, "We're not getting an arc this year. There just isn't one." But again, maybe it will be due to the restrictions that we're all getting on and off in our lives, and they may have said, "Okay, we have to really pare this down and get this filmed quickly and with as few people as possible to make sure we get this finished." And then they brought everybody in for the finale. Like, okay, for the finale, we're going to have everybody here, and then it's done, and then we all go home. But I'm looking forward to the next season of the show. I'm sure there'll be a next season of the show. And I've always said about The Simpsons, that a bad episode of The Simpsons is still better than about half of what's on TV. A bad season of Letterkenny is still better than half the shows that are on TV, as far as I'm concerned. So, not to say that it was a bad season necessarily. It just didn't feel like a season. It felt more like sketch comedy that you would see on a YouTube channel. So, I'd be interested to know what other people think. Again, remember, I'm giving them a pass because it's a pandemic. They can't shoot like they normally do. There's a lot of restrictions. Like I said, they would have had the hockey footage. They would have had more Shoresy stuff. They would have had more of that stuff, but they couldn't. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.